welcome to this program, which is a workshop on training the next generation of knowledge workers, by which we mean professionals, academics, students, policymakers. It is part of a range of training programs and workshops, short courses, international conferences, and other meetings like roundtables and seminars that we have planned under the umbrella of a concept to transform and democratize global education and change. The point of this is that we feel that some of the key skills that are not directly subject matter related in higher institutions may not be given the enough or adequate attention in the training of graduates. And then they will transfer weaknesses that come from that kind of lack into their careers. And therefore today, this is the fourth in the series, which started in August. This is the third actually in the series for October. And we have it every month from November upwards. The particular topic we are looking at today is a masterclass on fundamental laws of success and 32 habits of highly creative people. I am associated with Co-City University. I'm a professor, of course, and I'm also founder and director of the International Center for Research and Human Development, Dominican University, Ibadan, which was formed in 2019 while I joined the CCU, 2018-2019. I'm also the founder and director of the Afri-World Higher Education and Research Observatory UK. It consists of two main platforms, African Higher Education and Research Observatory UK, AfriHero, and International Center for Research and Enterprise Development, ICRED, which is almost like a kind of an online university system that is attached to AfriHero itself. So while I welcome you again, I am moving on now to talk about this particular topic now. What we hope to explore in this topic are four key ideas. We want to look at the 15 fundamental laws of success and the 32 skills of highly creative people. We want to also explore how these competencies can play out in different settings across academia, industry, government, and wider society. We typically tend to call this amalgam of spaces or settings the quadruple helix, and we call it briefly the cure helix from time to time. I will also explain the importance of how we need to be able to galvanize skills across these settings instead of maybe only in the areas where we are working directly. Okay. Thirdly, we need to we want to look at how we can use those masteries, that is the laws and the habits, to become nonlinear, highly productive and entrepreneurial in our different life worlds. This concept of life worlds embraces our careers, our family life, our finances, our health, everything about us really, even our spiritual life. And then we also now want to talk about, within this particular workshop, of perspectives that can link to these concepts. Whether somebody is an academic, for instance, how does an academy function with these competencies? Or student, how do students take advantage of that to become more highly skilled and employable? Professionals, similarly, how do they mobilize these skills at work? And policymakers, senior management of organizations, both educational and in government and private sector, how will they actually use such competencies to make better policies that can align with the strategies of the organizations they are leading? So that in an omnibus way, we're asking a key question: how will such masteries promote your life And that is the, the summary of what it is that we're trying to do today. Okay, but what is the rationale for doing this? I just want to, provide a teaser in the sense of, look at this little puzzle. Have you ever wondered why many chief executive officers of big corporations in developed countries like UK sometimes run the outfits mainly based on their first degree qualifications, for instance? Why graduate students from some African universities, for instance, I'm not saying only African, some developing countries, even some other countries, may not competently manage even just sections of workforces under them competently without at least 2 years on the job training. And then why companies prefer, therefore, to hire internationally trained students from UK and US, for example. So these are the puzzles that provoke our decision to explore these kinds of skills. And there are so many that because we can't accommodate them in a single workshop, we spread them across the year or the years actually, and do them as a series of monthly workshops. Can we just interact a little bit by answering some of these questions, if you don't mind? Or if you want us to go back to them, by the time we presented the nuggets of this particular workshop, that's okay. But I think that if we can just have a little conversation, an ice-breaking conversation, just based on these questions, that might be interesting to bring us into conversation. If you want me to start it off, fair enough, I will, okay? And after that, if you want to join it, that would be good enough. Let me just explain, for instance, what I mean by the fact that in the UK and some other places where these skills have been mainstreamed sufficiently within the curricula of universities and polytechnics and other educational institutions, that BSc holders from those countries are very comfortable running, very good organizations and companies, sometimes very large companies, based on just their single qualification, without having to be, have a master's or PhD or some other thing else. The reason for that, from my view, because having stayed in UK for almost 26 to 27 years now, I've observed the difference between the way I was trained in Nigeria, at the University of Nigeria, where I studied statistics, quite very good, very deep theoretical and conceptual training within statistics. But to be honest, the exposure to other skills outside that technical subject matter was quite not what you can see overseas. There was not even any attempt, to be honest, to teach those skills particularly. But of course, there is what we call GS courses those days. Wherefore, if you are in sciences, you are encouraged to go and take a general course in social sciences and vice versa, just to widen your scope. And it is also intended that some of those skills can come from your electives. For instance, if you are a mathematician and you're picking an elective from economics in first year, you might then understand the way the economy works, and then it might expose you to some skills that are outside mathematical sciences. But that is not enough, okay? And examples of that is even in UK, for instance, a lot of people that didn't even have to have degrees are doing very well. People like Richard Branson, he's running Virgin Corporation, you know that. Bill Gates never finished his university education. He dropped out of Harvard because he felt that he knew a lot of coding. Why should the parents be forcing him to go into Harvard and stay another 4 years, just when actually by his, I think, end of his first year and beginning second year, I learned, he was correcting the professors that were teaching him coding because he learned so much coding, when he was younger. So what we are leading to that is that if skills, other than just the subject matter skills, are properly mainstreamed and developed while students are learning within universities, that prepares them for being able to handle roles that are quite expansive In other words, enhancing their capacities to lead innovatively organizations, either the ones they set up themselves, and you can know that those people easily set up their own companies, or the ones that they are working for as managers, and so on and so forth. Examples of these also, you remember, Elon Musk, for instance. Of course, he's properly trained. He has a BSc in physics, master's in physics from Stanford, and did an MBA from another university, either Berkeley, for instance, which expanded his horizon, and so many other examples. So my view here is that we need to do better in Nigeria, in Africa, in developing countries with this kind of skills. And the ones we are working on today, apart from the ones we've worked on in the other three last workshops, 2 last workshops, are crucial here, because these are fundamental laws of success and habits of creativity, which if you don't have enough of those ones, you will struggle to be a good CEO anywhere in the world. Even your own business, you will not manage it carefully. You will not even know the best way to manage your own business, even if you had the idea to set it up. So it's important that we take this seriously. If, in terms of students, generally, I've mentioned that they need to be properly trained in this, even before they pick even more of it on the job. The problem is, how many of those jobs are available? Therefore, the more we can mainstream this within universities, it might be their only chance of getting this, because if they don't necessarily get a job immediately, they'll start learning all those kind of stuff. They may not even have opportunity to develop them enough, and therefore it's important we do that. And this explains why sometimes, even if students that are trained in the home countries are academically sound and theoretically deep enough, they are not, they are a bit disadvantaged when it comes to hiring, because these organizations that are international know that those skills were not properly mainstreamed. And the worry we have is that they're not really difficult to bring into the curricula. It's just that the way the curricula is structured at the moment, there's not enough space within the curricula from first year to fourth year, for instance, of a standard 4-year program for those things to be fitted in. So that what the NUC in Nigeria has done, for instance, is to, promote entrepreneurial skills, which is related to those skills. But again, that happens in only 2 courses in entrepreneurship. Maybe those in business, for instance, may acquire more because they are nearest neighbor to the skills we are talking about. But what of mathematicians? What of historians? What of biologists? Do you exclude them from having enough training in those skills and therefore disadvantage them almost for life in terms of their careers? So that is why we are interested in this workshop. Before I continue, does anybody want to make any contribution to that first slide anyway? Or do you want me to continue first? Okay, I take it that I can continue for now. All right. Okay, let us suppose that all of us that came here can be classified as either undergraduate and postgraduate students. I am one of them. I'm always a student, to be honest about it, because I keep learning things. Beginning academics, those younger academics who just came out of uni with their higher qualifications, masters and maybe PhDs, and are trying to lecture. They need a lot of this type of skills. Because the idea is that you can begin to mainstream these skills in the way you set your assessments for your modules, so that students are learning those skills by the time they're doing coursework, indirectly learning those skills. In addition to maybe, bigger opportunities for them to learn them through guest lecturers or the university or institution organizing, experts to come in and manage this type of dispositions. Officers in higher educational institutions need them. So you look at, for instance, the registry of a university, for instance, the Directorate of Planning, Directorate of Entrepreneurship Studies, for instance, research centers, the Vice Chancellor's group themselves, the senior management team, Then in organizations, the CEO, normally call them the C-suites, all of those people that actually are at the top of the organogram in companies, they cannot even actually run those companies, as I said before, without those skills. Professionals from different ministries, of course, but when people graduate, they become professionals. Even academics are professionals within academia anyway. They are professionals in the sense that they are doing academic work, following principles of training that make them capable of being able to teach disciplines. And then, more importantly for us, again, staff from startups, organizations. Of course, you know that almost 80 to 90% of the most economies in developing countries are actually sustained by SMEs, for instance, and companies, and the private sector generally. So those skills, again, need to be trained into some of those operators. And of course, some of them have it because of the different places they studied or experiences they've already had on the job. Okay, in terms of looking at the overall benefits, therefore, looking at all these kinds of attendees that we all belong to, we are looking at how to the mastery of the fundamental laws. The importance of these laws, when I expose them to you, you'll be saying, oh, why is Patrick making these laws look as if they're outlandish? It's because they are laws you may actually easily relate with. There are things you may know already. But the problem is that if we don't bring them together and focus our minds on them, we may not have the inclination to keep working on them, to be able to deepen how we know them and how we can use them. That's the important. Just to bring it to our awareness that these are those particular things we need to mind if we want to get ahead in life. So those fundamental laws transcend academia, industry, public services. They are irrespective of where you are. It doesn't matter whether you're an academic, professional, policymaker, student, a leader or an entrepreneur, for instance. You need them. There are also some other generic and higher order skills that are linked to them, which I might flash up while I'm running this. I may not necessarily focus on them. For instance, one of them is what is called the five minds for the future, propounded by Gardner in 2008, for instance. I'm going to talk about them briefly later. And these are about, for instance, what is called the discipline mind, for instance, the mind that comes from you training in a field and being able to apply that training across settings, especially the curricular helix, for instance. The synthesizing mind, ability to bring things together, you'll see that it is one of those laws and also one of those habits. The responsible mind, the creative mind, and the ethical mind. These are important. For instance, that it is lack of ethical minds that bequeath serious amount of, or inflicts serious amount of pain on Africa and developing countries through corruption. Because if those leaders had those 5 minds, for instance, or have those particular habits we are talking about, which we are going to see now, they would not want to be as corrupt as they are now, almost abandoning and forgetting other members of society and just fending for themselves. So these are the importance of those. The other thing is that we also need to look at being hands-on, relating some of the concepts we talk about today to our everyday life, to our circumstances, for instance. I'm going to be using my own to do that, but I encourage you, at some point, we're going to break up quickly and then do some little bit of tasks to know whether you can start applying some of them straight away or remembering how you normally use them for those of you that are very experienced in your own different situations. Okay. And what is important is how to then reflect on the joinage between those skills and our lives. And then exposing us to the fact that there are opportunities for follow-on training and mentoring and coaching in some of these skills within AfriHero, as we have put down here. Okay, you may now see those 15 laws. Can any of you relate to some of these, please? Can somebody relate to one of them and say, look, this is something I know and I have been working on, or I'm familiar with, or I actually have a lot of interest in? Can somebody say that amongst all of us now, please?
I would start with myself, really.
Okay.
Habit of doing more than paid for. I'm just looking at it from my own perspective,
Yes.
Doing things for myself in addition to what I do on a daily basis that I'm being paid for, but adding more to that to develop myself.
That's a good one. That's a very good one. I like that particular habit because, to be honest, if you go into an organization and only try to size up your work with what you think they're paying you, most organizations at the beginning don't pay too well anyway. So part of the things you might be getting is just to get experience from which you can migrate to a higher position within the industry, for instance. But no matter your level in any organization, it's critical that you come with a mindset where you're offering the best you can offer to that organization, irrespective of what they're paying at the moment. Because at the end of the day, if you do that well enough, you might be able to knock on the door of the CEO or the manager and say, you know what, I want a raise. I want a raise based on my output. And evidence and facts always win. But if you've not had that habit and you are not able to generate the extra layer of level of output that somebody who's working more than paid for normally generates, and you are trying to just do enough to keep the job, then you are not going to make enough impact. And if, unfortunately, one day the company is not earning enough and wants to downsize, they may start looking at the guys that are the stars that they would never actually, relieve of their duties. Those are the ones they call the star performers that must be in the system. And the ones that they think are not productive enough, we have to go. So that is the risk of not having this kind of mindset. The other reason that I like the mindset is that it's spiritual, really, because it's spiritual in the sense that some of the people we know about, or some of the experiences we have as Christians, as Muslims, we have always known that God gives himself the best of what he has to us as the created beings. And therefore, if we want to imitate God in any way, we have to give our best also to anybody that we are working for, because it's about loving your neighbor as you love yourself, something like that. Okay, I will come to that, and that's a good example.
Yeah, can I just chip in, please?
Okay. Oh, is that Andy? Welcome then. Thank you very much.
That's right. I was just trying to add to what I think, was it Ify that said something about habit of doing more than paid for?
It's Amaka, I think. Yes.
Right. Amaka, if I get it correctly, I think it does the sort of labor of love kind of thing, I believe, where you're giving up your time not in anticipation of getting paid. Yes. And of course, there's another side to that, because you're self-developing yourself. Self-development is taking place at that point in time. For me, I think there is the element of the imagination and enthusiasm, and they tend to work hand in glove because they are both driven by some element of curiosity. I'm never in the business of minding my business. So I'm kind of curious. I want to know why things are going the way they are. And in that sort of process, or while trying to process that, the imagination bit starts kicking in. And if it does become interesting, I might delve deeper, and my passion for it will begin to set in as well. So there is, you notice that I've used some interesting words like passion. Sometimes when I do presentations, they say, oh, we like your passion. Instead of telling me politely, my friend, you're shouting. Yeah, because when you see me, some of my students actually say, oh, you remind me of my pastor. You know how pastors come? There is a God somewhere. You know how they stand and move authoritatively and stamp. You can see that animation, yes. That passion.
Yes.
So that's something that's quite interesting to think in terms of. And it also leads on to some of the points I put in the charts. I listed a series of skills before going to AfriHero website to pull out some as well that tick the boxes. So one of those is obviously digital literacy. That's very important. When you were talking about Elon Musk, I was exploring Dangote. Apparently, he had his first degree somewhere in Egypt.
Yes.
Yeah, so he too is just a first degree holder. I'm not even too sure if it's a proper university. I'm still exploring. You see where curiosity is coming from.
Yeah.
So, by end of the day, there's something that's quite important for us to consider, which is leaving the outliers, such as the mosques, Gates, and Dangotes, and looking at captains of industry, the everyday people, which is something that's quite interesting to think in terms of. And some have even gone under the radar, like Nick Clegg. Nick Clegg was in government, and after the coalition collapse, he moved on to Facebook because he had inherent skills. It was not his governance or political skills or party leadership that gave him a job at Facebook, but other skills we didn't know about. Because we related Nick Clegg, by the way, is Sheffield. It was the MP, a Sheffield MP.
Yep.
So that's something that's quite interesting. So when it comes to bringing it back to teaching and learning, I'm looking at some of the core, the basics. Number one is your ability to actually critical thinking is quite important, especially for higher education in particular. So that critical thinking means you have some mindset of analytical sort of framing of your mind. And of course, there is also the need to be able to communicate whatever it is that you unpack or interrogate. So communication skills come in as well. Then more importantly, communication is not just verbal, written as well. Academic writing skills. These are some of the basics, or the what I'll call the must-haves. Every other thing is an add-on. I'll just pause there. And
thank you very much, Andy. That's a wonderful contribution, and we want to also, welcome Andy again to this. Andy actually is the moderator for this, but we carried on knowing that he will join at some point. These are very wonderful examples. I'll give you a simple example of this idea of habit of more than paid for. When I joined CCO in 2020 November, there was a little grant that was coming up on COVID, and that is to investigate the role of the private sector in public health supply chain during and after COVID in Enugu State in Nigeria. I remember that when we had the initial brainstorm on that, because the amount of money was, $15,000 US, some voices were saying it's not a big grant, so let's not overwork ourselves. Let's make it, simple and nice, something just enough to justify the money if we succeed. But because of my principle that I need to add a lot more, I need to do far more than even any product owner or any client expects from me, I decided to, with my team, because I'm the principal investigator, I was driving the writing of the proposal to widen the scope, and I called it wider ambience. I put it there as wider ambience of the work, rescoped the work, added a lot more things. The reason for doing that, I said, this is an opportunity to intervene in that important space, public health. Even with or without COVID, public health has always been challenging in most countries, especially developing countries, and of course also in Nigeria. I said, if I'm getting a little funding of this nature to investigate things with India, why not use that opportunity to do a bit more, to be able to come up with better recommendations that can reposition the public health in the state, hitting the technical interest of the COVID impact, as well as the private sector focus, as well as the wider focus. And that's why we widened it to involve communities, to involve this, and it's now made that particular work far more interesting, to be honest, than should have been the case if we wanted to deliver just what we think is just required. And when we were having reviews from the funders, they were mentioning that particular proposal, that particular project from Coast City University is exemplary, to be honest. So when there was an international conference in US this year, in July, and they were told to select just a few of the sponsored projects, our own was almost number one there. So we were only 3 of the awardees that they selected to sponsor on that US conference, when actually they gave almost 20-something to 25 people at different universities, awards. So that's what I'm saying, that sometimes when you come into life with a broader mind to be your best, to do your best in any situation, give more if you can. That always is a very nice habit to have. You don't know when you gain a lot more in future just because of those little extras you give. Your quality becomes known. People will say, yes, if I pay him for something, I get far more than I pay for. And once you're known for that, the sky is your limit. Okay, let me just quickly now move into these. Now that I've seen that we are getting interested in it, all of us know the idea of having a definite chief aim. That is key. In anything you're doing, we normally talk about objectives, goals. As a human being, as a person, you have to have a definite chief aim in life. If you ask me my definite chief aim, it's so easy to say. I am a corporate academic, meaning I try to deeply research phenomena and deeply apply them within the curriculum helix. That's my aim in life. At the end, then I have a cause that is attached to that aim, which is what people normally typically call vision or whatever, or mission. But it is to transform and democratize global higher education and change. So meaning, if I'm doing my statistics, if I'm doing my business analytics, if I'm doing my economics, applied economics, some of the areas I dabble into sometimes, or my mathematical finance, if I'm supervising PhD students, if I'm mentoring and coaching and mentoring and people so that they can have more experience working with me in different platforms I manage, I am always conscious of making sure that I am progressing that chief aim. Why are we running all this monthly? Andy, I, Amaka, and a lot of other people in a committee where we design these things, Nadima, Anyika, so many of us, about 10 of us, where we design these things and brainstorm on them, plan them before we roll them out. Why are we, most of the time, telling people to come to have it free? It's not because we don't know that we're putting a lot of time in it, but we have that little aim of trying to democratize, to allow people to have opportunities, which some of us already had, for instance. Thank God. Why can't we share some of the knowledge we have? It doesn't mean we will continue. It doesn't mean that if I run a 4-week or 8-week workshop, it will be completely free. Short course or workshop. It may not be free, but I still have to look at the pricing to make sure that I'm reasonable, or I give enough discounts to those who cannot afford it, something like that. Or I liaise with sponsors to know whether they can pay for a lot of slots for students, for instance, who are indigent or who are not able to, or even for young academics who or professionals who may be in the early ranks of their career, they may not be able to have something like that. It is that sense that is my chief aim. So it doesn't matter from what discipline I'm coming from, it that is central in my life. If I'm doing anything with anybody, I try to say myself, what can I add in the life of this person? I don't immediately think, what can this person give me? I know eventually the person, it may end up being an exchange of values, which is still okay. We share things, but I also ask myself, am I giving enough to this person as I'm supposed to be? Something like that. It's a definite chief aim. And of course, there are many of those chief aims. If you're in academia, you may say, okay, I want to be a professor in my field. It's a wonderful aim to have. But I'm also interested that it's not just being the professor, it is being the professor that has impact in the lives of other people, that has impact across wider, settings, the curriculum helix, for instance. And these are the things that, and of course, that links to prosecute that kind of aim, a chief aim in life. You need to have the self-confidence to deal with it. You need to be confident enough to move in and start working on that aim. You need to have the self-esteem to be able to manage yourself very well, the self-efficacy to be professionally, professional and effective in what you're doing, and efficient as well. So I use efficacy to tie up efficiency and effectiveness. We know they're not the same. Of course, effectiveness is about having the right directional approach, but efficiency is doing it well while you're already on that route. Okay. The habit of saving Well enough, we all want to save for the future. That's why we have pensions. Some people may work harder, build portfolio income, have more money to save, so that apart from their work pension, they may also have some personal pension pot, being done. Some can invest in, the market, the financial markets, for instance, take shares. Some can build, rented apartments and things like that, just to be able to know that at the end of the day, they have some kind of income they can draw on. But in terms of saving now, I think what is important is for us to leverage our careers and not be linear. And that's why I started by saying that one of the aims is for us to use these skills to stop becoming more and more linear, to become more and more non-linear. For instance, if you're an academic and you have a lot of these kind of skills, you go in and go and present a talk. You are paid something by the side. You know people. You widen your network. A little bit of coins are dropping into your account. You become more bankable, the way they normally say it. So it's about working harder and not to limit yourself on the salary you may be having now, or even possibly to create businesses yourself and grow them. Initiative and leadership, of course, that is the subject of on the lips of everybody. Some pay lip service to it. Politicians will talk to you that they want to provide the best leadership for the country or for their states or for their ministries or whatever they are appointed to. At the end of the day, the rhetoric may not match the reality, but it's important that we ourselves as individuals take enough interest in developing our leadership capabilities. Very important. Very, very important. I mentor people on leadership today because I know that that is key to enabling people to be able to run their lives. I'm not even talking about leadership only in terms of running a formal organization. Running your life effectively is self-leadership. You must have it, capacity to do that. Plan yourself, understand how your finances are working for you, understand how your decision-making is impacting others in your family, in wider circle of friends and networks where you belong. Being known to be somebody who is actually a leader, and can have initiatives. Imagination, of course, Professor Andy has touched on this, so I don't need to dwell too much on it. Enthusiasm is equally talked about that. We need to be enthusiastic about what we're doing. If, for instance, I'm not enthusiastic about what I'm doing, why should I continue every month to be working with Andy and my team to be running workshops, for instance? We're even trying to develop them into short courses. In the next few weeks or two, we are rolling out a range of international conferences covering even technical topics. This is because of the passion and the enthusiasm to do stuff that can uplift the world, especially the areas we come from, for instance, or the areas where we think there are more problems than developing countries. Self-control, I don't need to over-elaborate on that. There are situations where self-control, the lack of it can damage somebody a lot. I'll give you a simple example. Somebody, I'm not trying to mention them, so these are things you can relate with. Somebody was made, for instance, a commissioner in the state, in Nigeria, for instance. And then there was an occasion where he was invited and he came with his entourage and things like that. And he was led into a very cool, cozy place for senior people or highly successful people. And a lot of exotic wines and drinks were brought for him out of respect. And he took far more than he could actually manage. At the end of the day, he was staggering. And somebody picked some pictures of him. And then before you know it, there was a problem of people wanting to do what, extort money from him, isn't it? Because they say they have a picture of where he was in a very bad state. And then he wasn't interested in either paying the ransom or anything. Eventually, they released it into the state administration, and he was relieved of his post just because he could not exercise that self-control for something he can afford. This is just a simple example of how our personalities can be destroyed in 1 second because we did not have discernment and self-control. We talked about doing more than we're paid for. Pleasing personality, who will deny that this is one of the key attributes we must have in life? If you are not pleasant at work, what happens is that people start picking on you. Before you know it, they start setting traps for you. And when they may even gang up and, say something that didn't really happen the way it happened. And then you are called into the manager's office and you are either giving warning in the first instance You come back, they try to exacerbate the situation. You come into a second problem again. Third problem, you're relieved of your post. This is because of you just did not realize that when you come into a workplace, you are trying to build communities. You're not necessarily going to be too friendly with people in that sense, but you can keep your professional distance, but be very friendly. A little bit of good morning, how are you? It's okay. But how many people say it gladly? So these are the little things that are pleasing. I don't want to even go into a lot of details where I got so much of what I never expected would come to me because I have a naturally pleasing personality. I laugh a lot. I'm humorous. I'm jovial. I'm always relaxed when I'm thinking about relating with people. I don't start making life difficult for people. It doesn't mean I'm not firm or disciplined. No, but I always look at life, from middle of the road, Aristotelian middle. I don't go to extremes in my life. Accurate thought, very important. If you're not accurate and focused and thinking deeply about what is more likely to be a scenario that happens, and you begin to misinterpret scenarios, in many situations, you get wrong solutions. And that does not bid well for you. Concentration is important as well. And then, of course, cooperation, which is related to being pleasant, related to being imaginative as well, working team. Of course, we all know that when you're going for jobs, for instance, they always talk about teamwork. Teamwork, very important. If you are not a team player, to be honest, no matter what you know, or how better you think you are compared to other people, nobody gives you a chance actually to even use that to your cleverness. And that is one thing about it. And it comes as well with humility, ability to listen to others and not impose your views directly on people. Work with people, elicit where they're coming from, understand their pain points, and work in a way that both of you or all of you can merge your ideas and provide a better solution that is collegial. Then, of course, talk about failure. It's important to have opportunities in your life where you fail. It's those who realize that actually there are nothing like failures as such, but temporary successes, or we call them bus stops on the way to success, something like that. So if, let's say, for instance, I'm teaching a new course in a field and my first year wasn't wonderful, I didn't quite fully understand what I was doing. In a way, you say I'm failing in the delivery, yes? But if I realize that I'm not doing well, but I have the capacity to go back and do a little more preparation, review that field more, put in more energy, maybe the next year I'm much better, that failure is no longer a failure in that sense. So, and you have to realize that that is the principle. Thomas Edison had to do all those kind of things he did, isn't it? 99 hours of respiration, 1 hour of inspiration, for instance, because he never believed that because that what he was trying to discover had not been discovered, that it will not be discovered. So he knows that any little experiment he was doing is not failure, but it's advancing him, gradually towards the ultimate point of success. Tolerance, very important. How many of us are tolerant? How many, even in our family lives? Before you know it, a little bit of discussion, somebody's flaring up. The person has not even listened to the other person talking, either a spouse or a child or a son or daughter, or even a friend or cousin. You have to do that. You have to be tolerant, show maturity, because if you don't understand where people are coming from, how are you going to, work with them in a way that better things come out, and so on and so forth. The golden rule, of course, summarizes everything. If you do not know that 24/7, 365, you must be able to do unto others as you expect others to do unto you. I'm afraid to say that you're not even supposed to have been created in the first instance. Because if you realize the creation itself, when it happened, it was about the amount of love that the creator of the world, God, gave us. And I'm not ashamed to mention it. And I know this thing I'm quoting now could also be in other religious books. In the Bible itself, Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 to 28, what does it say there? Let us make man in our own image. In our own image. Male and female, we shall make them. So if God can put you in a position to be a microcosm of the amount of power he has, not to be equal to God, of course, but you have all those makings. And of course, he tells you later on in other readings of the Word of God, for instance, that the two important things in life is to love your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, and to do so for your neighbor. Why can't you realize that rule? Why are people so selfish today? It's because they don't understand the golden rule. They don't even want to practice it. When people are looting the treasury of a country for only their families, they are completely riding roughshod over the golden rule. Go back in history and check the lives of some of those people where they are today. Some of them are either dead or the families they were bringing out the money is in this array. So the golden rule is one of the key principles we must learn. I must not do anything that can knowingly injure somebody else's welfare. That's very important. Now, do we have a short break or do we go on? I think I can go on with the 32 habits. What you will notice here is that some of these habits are beginning also to reinforce some of the laws. They're all kind of, interwoven in a sense. But the laws are almost like a high level set of principles that are very, very, very fundamental. While these ones are also similar principles, but they should be habits we live with every minute of our life. Because if we can live with those habits, if we can live out those habits, exhibit them in our lives, we are almost invariably living out the 15 laws. Are we sensitive to contexts, opinions, and issues? Are we emotionally intelligent? There have been situations, for instance, I give an example, a situation where somebody who was the most productive, and even is today the most productive staff in a particular department, all of a sudden the person that is head of the department decided to attack this person because either she was fearing that this person knows a lot and continued to make life miserable for that person. Always finding fault, always going behind and telling management that this particular person is not good enough. While doing this, she was regularly using this person's innovations, using this person's frameworks and blueprints to present to the senior management the successes that is coming from the department without attributing this to that particular staff, until at some point the staff decided to speak up. Talk to me, and I said, you know what? Let's be emotionally intelligent about this. Generate evidence. I'm moving on. This is how you structure your complaint. The person is on her way out now from that organization because of the power of this particular staff that she was trying to belittle, to be so emotionally intelligent in the way she positioned the complaint with so much evidence. And that's what it takes. Sensitive to context. Do I have adversaries in my organization? How do I manage adversaries? Do I have friends? How do I get the best of them and give them the best as well? How do I relate to management? By knowing the strategic direction of my organization and therefore playing along in a way that I'm supporting and reinforcing that strategic direction. If I'm called to a meeting to brainstorm on ideas, am I original enough? Do I understand the context? Because if you are not understanding the context, you might be preferring solutions that may look nice to have, but are not must-haves, really, in terms of where the organization is, or the opinions and issues that are being canvassed and explored. Not being motivated by money, this is very important. It's almost like the law of doing far more than you're paid for. Because if you're motivated by money, you won't be able to do that. You will not be able to do that kind of thing. Because you always be trying to finish it quickly, go to another one to pick another money, you're not delivering that extra layer of depth that contribution requires and things like that. Sense of destiny, yes, we need to have it. Why? If you don't have a sense of destiny and you're an academic, for instance, why are you persisting in the game? You know, because if you persist in the game, play to the rules, advance yourself, do all you are supposed to do that fall within the criteria for promotion, you'll be promoted. The same thing outside academia, in the Quadruple Helix, in government, in any work in the private sector. Who become the CEOs? They are the guys that have a sense of destiny. They know that if they persist in doing something well and learning more about it, researching it, immersing themselves in the nuances and nitty-gritties of that, they will end up being successful. So there's nothing like a fear of failure in their lives. These are guys that are the masters of the universe. I'll give you one simple example. Bob Diamond, of former CEO of Barclays Capital, for instance, who was paid $20 million a year. If he never had a sense of destiny, he cannot come to the position where he was head of the investment banking in Barclays Corp, the whole Barclays, the number one, the alpha male, the top dog in investment banking. Eventually, he became the CEO. So, of course, talk about other people who are vice chancellors, the capable ones. I'm not talking about just vice chancellors that are appointed by, who knows who. The guys that actually are deliverers, the doers. When you see them, you see the difference. Or you talk about top generals who go into the battlefield and conquer. The other ones go into the battle and they're dilly-dallying because they don't have the sense of destiny. Eventually, they are overrun, you see. So why do you hear about all the powerful, the Eisenhowers and all those people? It's because they're the guys that go in and say, I am capable of doing this. Let's plan through it. Let's storm the enemy, something like that. Of course, the enemy in your own case is life itself and you. You see what I mean? Adaptability, easy. Because in that case, you want to be adaptable. You want to have, a range of skills. You think things through. You know how to say, this situation was slightly different from the one that happened last year. How do I adapt to it? Or this framework is being used very well in business administration or in marketing or in entrepreneurship. Can I adapt it in what I'm doing here in, mathematical consulting, for instance? So adaptability is very important. Being tolerant of ambiguity, yes. Most of the things that give value in life are not black and white. They are not yes or no situations. They are things that require multiple lenses, multiple answers, critical thinking and decision making. Of course, later on, when we are writing on the full dossier on this, the book, Critical Thinking and Decision Making by Paul and Linda, for instance, has 8 criteria, 8 elements of critical thinking and 7 criteria for judging them. So if you place them on a matrix, you have a total of 56 boxes through which you can play the game of critical thinking and tolerance of ambiguity, for instance. We can do a lot more on that later. Being observant, how many of us are observant? You come into an organization, somebody has come into a place to work for about 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. The person is not even observant enough to know what exactly is going on in where he or she is working. He just comes to work 9 to 5 and goes. What is happening really, he's not able to have sharp antenna, professional antenna, academic antenna to pick the signals that are coming from a place he's supposed to know well in order to survive in, something like that. Ability to perceive the world differently is linked to multiple answers and ambiguity. How do we perceive the world differently? My own simple way of doing it is to use the Quadruple Helix as a lens, a multi-lens through which I do it. So if I take something I'm doing in academia, I ask myself, how does it work in academia? Fair enough. How can I move it into professional training? How can I use it directly on students? How can I use it to teach young academics who are maybe under me? How do I use it to supervise my PhDs? How do I use it to run, to serve as a senior management person, maybe either as a director or what, or a professor in a department? So by looking at that, and then in the private sector, how do I use it to run projects that can bring money in, income and other things to be able to enable us to do better what we're already doing? So in that case, it's about understanding that you should not box yourself in the area you think you're already comfortable, your comfort zone. You should expand your horizon by moving ideas, effortlessly, possibly, across the Quadruple Helix. Okay? You don't have to do all of it in every single element, but you may have at least out of those four elements of the helix, you may have work well in the 2 of them, maybe industry and academia, industry and government, government and academia, something like that. So you'll be able to enlarge your coast